Welcome back, folks, and today we're going to talk about Michael Chandler versus Justin Gaethje. My thoughts, I'm going to break it down, and then my prediction. So, we've got Gaethje going against Chandler. Chandler, if I recall correctly, he's like 22-6, 21-6, something like that. And then Gaethje, he's had 3 losses. All 3 of the losses came in the UFC. When he came to the UFC, he was undefeated. He fought in the World Series of Fighting, which is now PFL. And they pretty much, knocked out everybody that he had fought up to that point. Was able to put them all away. Then he knocked out Michael Johnson, a very good fight. Then he ran into Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez, and both those guys were able to put Justin Gaethje away. Then he started listening to his coach, Trevor Whitman, and after that, he was able to put in a string of knockouts together, knocked out Donald Cerrone, knocked out James Vick, and then eventually built up to an interim fight with Tony Ferguson, and he dominated Ferguson throughout that fight. Ferguson was able to drop him, I think it was the end of the second round, but Tony was losing that round up to that point, and then Gaethje just put a clinical whooping on Ferguson. So, a lot of people believe after that Justin Gaethje had evolved something extremely different than what he was before. Now, he had made some improvements, but he didn't really change too much. Now, before you say I'm wrong, let me explain. He just started listening to his coach. His coach had been telling him to do that for a long time before. Take some of the steam off of your punches. Don't leave yourself so open. Don't always try to get into a brawl with your opponent where whoever lands the hardest shot is going to win. Use your space, use your range, and be patient. And he started doing that in that fight, and that's how he was able to break Tony down. Now, after that fight, a lot of people figured that he was going to go and beat Khabib, but he didn't. Khabib took him down, and then Khabib does what he does, and was able to beat him relatively easy after that. So, the reason why that wasn't as big as it was to me is, I'm going to be honest, guys. I don't think that Tony Ferguson, I'm not saying he was not a great fighter, but I don't think he was as good as some people put him. And you could say the same about any fighter. Really, really big fans or fanboys of people will often always overrate what they can do until they meet, that resistance. And then people who don't want to admit they made a mistake will make excuses as to why the losses happened rather than give credit to the other fighter. A lot of people were saying because Adesanya lost to Jan Blachowicz, he's not as good as people think he is. I'm like, well, he fought a light heavyweight who walks around at heavyweight weight, who's a better kickboxer than you gave him credit for, who's a better striker than you gave him credit for. That's why he lost. And, he was the bigger man. Why couldn't he knock Adesanya out? Because Adesanya is better than you give him credit for. Things like that. People were saying when Rockhold lost to Blachowicz, he was done because Blachowicz wasn't a good enough fighter for a former champion to have lost to. Didn't make any sense. So, Ferguson was very good, but the reason why Ferguson had done so well, and I said this before, is because he had a lot of time to heal in between his wars. He fought, and those weren't all his fault. I'm not saying if they had offered him fights, he would have taken them. He had to be out when he injured his knee, so that's not his fault. But he was still fighting, I think he fought twice in 16, once in 17, once in 18. So, between the fights he got in, he would do the same thing Gaethje would do a lot. He would let his opponent hit him and say, I've got the better chin. Let's see who has the better chin, and he'd eventually win. But, his fight with Pettis, he took damage. That's the fight where he actually got wobbled and hurt. And, but he had a lot of time to heal in between those wars. So, when that healing process is condensed, and you don't have as much time to heal, you can't keep taking damage like that. You still suffer the damage anyway in between the fights, but obviously if you have more time to heal and recuperate, you're going to do better than if you just went to war in January, then you go out and you go to war in March, and these are, 3-round, 5-round wars where you're taking a lot of damage even though you're winning. You can't keep doing that. So Gaethje started to use his space. Now, Chandler. We look at Michael Chandler. And Chandler, the man, he believes in hard work. If you look at his history as to how the man worked, he grew up in a house that his father built with his own hands. His mom was a hard worker. His wife's a hard worker. Before, she was very athletic herself. So he surrounded himself with like-minded people all the time. When he was in high school, he broke his hand, and he was going in and training while he had a cast on his hand, with one arm. So he's got that worker's mentality. He has himself been in quite a few wars. He had 2 wars with Eddie Alvarez. I thought he won the second fight. If you want to give the last rounds a 10-8 to Eddie, I still had Chandler winning by 1 point or it'd be a draw, because I said you could argue that Chandler's 4th round was a 10-8 round. But, he didn't make excuses. He didn't complain about it. He kept on going back and he got the belt again. The big thing that a lot of people were saying about Chandler when he came to the UFC was that he wasn't elite and he hadn't faced tough enough competition in order for him to, hang with the best of the best. He had gone to war with Alvarez twice, and this was, prime Eddie Alvarez. And he beat him the first time, and in my opinion, beat him the second time. But, even if he didn't beat him, it was still a good fight. He still put up a good fight against him on the judges' scorecards. He went to war with Vincent Henderson, who wasn't past his prime the first time they fought. I think the first time they fought was back in 16 or 15. It wasn't like Henderson was way past his prime. Still a very good fighter. WEC champion, lightweight champion, UFC lightweight champion, and Bellator lightweight contender. Beat him very soundly in my opinion. Then he came to the UFC, fought Dan Hooker, and knocked Dan Hooker out with the first punch he threw. Fought Charles Oliveira, won the first round in dominant fashion, almost got the finish, came out, second round and got finished. So the question people are asking is, how's the fight going to go? And so I'm going to break down what I think will happen. Both those guys go for the finish. Both of them don't like it going to the hands of the judges. So they both have a tendency to walk forward towards each other. Now that's a good thing for Chandler. That's a good thing for Gaethje. To move forward. But the reason why there's a downside to it is the people you're fighting know what you're going to try and do. And everyone's expecting this to be a banger because they're like, Chandler likes to stand up and bang, Gaethje likes to stand up and bang. However, I think there are some tangible as to why I believe this fight favors Chandler. First of all, there's the wrestling aspect. And yes, guys, I 100% believe that Gaethje cannot out-wrestle Michael Chandler. I don't think he can at all. And the interesting thing is they've had some similar training partners. Gaethje trained with Kamaru Usman, with Trevor Whitman, but Chandler has trained with Kamaru Usman before. He trained his wrestling with him. Gaethje works on striking with Kamaru Usman. Also, they've had somewhat of a similar opponent, Michael Johnson. Michael Chandler wrestled him previously, and he would spar with him a lot. And then Gaethje actually fought him. And I know people say sparring doesn't matter. Well, guys, sparring is not necessarily the same as a real fight, but it does matter. If sparring didn't matter, fighters wouldn't do it. If it didn't matter at all, fighters wouldn't do it. And yes, I know Max Holloway stopped sparring, but if Max had not sparred previously before that, he wouldn't be as good a fighter as he is today, in my opinion. That's my opinion. You could argue maybe he would be anyway. But if sparring wasn't necessary, fighters would never do it. So it does count for something. You work on your tendencies in sparring. You're trying to get rid of your weaknesses. You're trying to sharpen your strengths. You're trying to help your partner sharpen your strength. And they're not trying to hurt each other permanently, so they're not doing it. There are some people who go out there and don't try to hurt people permanently in the ring. But realistically, let's be real, Chandler and Gaethje both like to throw bombs. I think I would be safe to say, in my opinion, that I believe Chandler probably hits a bit harder than Gaethje. But I think the reason for that is because Chandler's a better range striker. Gaethje likes being in the inside, and he likes fighting up close and personal. Chandler will use his range more, and it's funny because, he's a really, really small guy. He's shorter than a lot of his opponents, and he doesn't have as great as reach as a lot of his opponents. But he uses his range properly. But Gaethje does like to lunge forward sometimes, and he had that tendency to get his head a little bit past his knee. It's not as bad as it used to be. In the Ferguson fight, we saw a lot of improvements, but he used to get it really far forward. And he doesn't do that as much anymore. He tries to keep it in the center. And again, working with Trevor Whitman, you're going to do that. Look what he did with Rose Namajunas and with Kamaru Usman. Both of them have gotten way better at their striking. So the tendencies of Chandler and Gaethje are both to throw heavy leather. But like I said, I don't believe Gaethje has the wrestling to stop him because he hasn't been doing it for a long time. And guys, wrestling is an extremely hard and grueling sport. I mean, when I went to wrestling class the first day, I had done a lot of conditioning and a lot of preparation for it. But even still, the first few days, I was getting ragdolled by guys who were my size or bigger because this is what they do very often. They're really good at it. And they were coming from an off season. So I was coming in there, it was my first time, but we were not necessarily close in the conditioning. Your shoulders are conditioned differently. Your back's going to be conditioned differently. Your legs are going to be sore in different areas. Your knees are going to feel a whole lot of the pain. There's a lot of things that just go in wrestling that if you take, a week or a month off of, it's extremely different when you go back in. And Gaethje talks about how the wrestling tires him out. So I believe Chandler's got the edge in the gas tank. He's got the edge in the range striking. The X factor that I feel is going to help Gaethje are some weaknesses. One, from going into all the wars, I don't think Chandler's chin is shot, but it's obviously not as good as it used to be. And, you know, your chin can't get better over time. Like I said, I don't think it's completely shot. People thought that Poirier was going to get knocked out by McGregor because he'd been knocked out by Michael Johnson and he'd been knocked out by McGregor. And they're like, oh, his chin's probably going to be gone. But they fought in a heavier weight class, 10 pounds heavier. He's still making a weight cut. But it definitely helped being up there a bit more. But he ate some solid shots from Conor because, you know, he was, you know, focus has a lot to do with it as well. And like people ask me all the time, that, well, Oliveira's not known for knocking people out. Why did he knock out Chandler? I'm like, Chandler looked away. And my coach told me, I don't care how big, tough, or strong you are. When you look away, you don't see that punch coming, it's going to put you away because you're not looking. You know, it seems like a very rookie mistake. But we saw that somebody with long range, because Charles has a very, very long reach, somebody with long range, they can crowd Chandler. And if he doesn't go straight to wrestling, they could hurt him. And the first, that 1-2 that tagged him, got him hurt. And, you know, he didn't really know what to do. He looked like he was going to run one way. Then he turned the opposite direction. Boom, got caught, got dropped, and got stopped. So I don't think he really has to fear that too much from Gaethje. He definitely has to worry about the pressure. But the range, you know, Gaethje doesn't have the same reach as Oliveira, if I'm correct. And I do believe that Chandler is the better range striker. He comes out with his shoulder very forward. He's got that leg there. Now that is going to be an X factor. That's going to be a big thing for Gaethje. Chandler does come out with that leg almost in a boxer stance. Like he's ready to go with that leg out. And y'all know Gaethje likes to rip those leg kicks. And he executes his leg kicks very well. You know, my coach said he said if he's a Thai kicker, couldn't do it better. He is very good with those leg kicks. Now, what do the leg kicks do? Do they open up a way for Chandler to take Gaethje down? Yes, they do. You're open for a takedown, but you don't want to lean onto an uppercut when doing that. So it's a dangerous sword right there. So I feel he's going to come out in that stance, and I do believe that because that leg is there, Gaethje is probably going to go for it. Now, I hope Gaethje has been working on his wrestling in this camp for his sake, because I really don't believe, guys, that he can stop Chandler from taking him down. I don't think he's been wrestling enough, and I think Chandler's wrestling is very good. You guys watch him wrestle Ben Henderson, and he was taking Henderson down. He suplexed Henderson, one of my favorite moments from Chandler's career. He was able to out-wrestle Ben Henderson. Henderson's a good wrestler. You know, he's been in there and he's ragdoll guys before, and he's gotten there people who try to submit him and they couldn't put him away. Very flexible, very strong, very powerful, and he's explosive himself. And then Chandler went in there and handled him pretty well the way he did. In the last round, he was in a bit of survival mode, but he did a very good job. And Gaethje's going to look to tear that leg up because it's right there for him to rip apart. And then I feel after that, Chandler's going to, you know, throw some 1-2s, get in that range, and Gaethje's going to try to turn it into a brawl. And I feel that Chandler is not going to be afraid to go forward, but I don't think he's going to try to brawl with Gaethje because he's the better range striker. And in camp, he probably knows that. He's better at range. He's the better wrestler. So why go into the area where the guy's better when you can stay in two areas where the fight has to eventually go where you have the upper hand? So I feel he's going to keep it at a range, and he's going to go for those takedowns. So when that is working for Chandler, and I believe it will be, that's when Gaethje, I think, is going to turn the pressure up. He's going to start ripping the leg kicks harder because, like I said, that leg is there for him to be hit. And let's not forget, Chandler has been TKO'd before from a leg injury. So he's going to be looking to tear that leg apart. And he's going to try to turn it into a brawl. Because, you know, if you kick somebody's leg and they turn to their side, their hips are away from you. So that takes away the takedown if it's done it properly. Because my hips need to be going this direction to shoot on you. So that takes away the takedown, you know, exposes his side, takes away the jab. And if he pushes in, it gets him against the cage, takes away his cross, and then he could try to turn it to a brawl. So I feel that a lot of the fight is going to be Gaethje trying to force Chandler to fight off the back foot. When Oliveira came out very quickly in that second round, he put Chandler on the back foot, and then that's when he was able to get him in trouble. Now, like I said, he didn't have the same range as Oliveira and the same height advantage, but I feel he's going to move forward against him very similarly. But I believe Chandler's wrestling is, you know, way past Gaethje's, especially because Gaethje hasn't been doing it for such a long time, and Chandler has been doing it against big guys like Usman, who's also not just a bigger guy, he's also a great wrestler. You know, if you're wrestling against good wrestlers, it's a good thing for you. So, what could happen? I feel that, you know, Gaethje, if he brawls and he forces Chandler into that back foot, he could get a mid-round, you know, stoppage, not very late, maybe around the third round. But I do believe that Chandler is either going to decision Gaethje or that he's going to finish him by TKO. If he takes him down and just pounds him out. Because we know Gaethje does not like to stop fighting. You know, he likes to keep on going. But I don't think there's much Gaethje can do off his back. He's not a huge threat in that area. I don't think he's got enough to stop the takedowns of Chandler. He's a much better wrestler. He's the better striker at range. But, you know, you can force somebody to close range if you're stronger than them. But I don't think he's much stronger than him either. We saw that with Poirier versus Holloway. Holloway was doing pretty good at his range. And then at the end of the first round, at the end of the second round, Poirier was able to force his way inside to close range, and that's where he got the better of Max. But Poirier's bigger than Max, and I'm pretty sure he's stronger than Max too. He's got a lot of muscle mass. He's about the same size, if not a little bit bigger than Jorge. And Jorge fights a weight class above him. Used to fight 2 weight classes above Poirier when Poirier was fighting back at 45. So that's how I feel picking Chandler. Like I said, the chin has taken a lot of damage through all the wars he's been in, but hey, Gaethje has too. So I feel it's 55-45. 55% favor of Chandler, 45% favor of Gaethje. Just because, like I said, Chandler's stance, it does leave you open to be leg kicked. And he does have a little bit of a problem when you put him on his back foot. But it's more so with speed. So if his chin wasn't compromised, I don't think it's, like I said, I don't think it's completely shot. But I think that's going to be a deciding factor here. Because Gaethje's going to throw bombs with every single punch. Because of that, if that were not the case, I'd have it about 70-30, because I really believe Chandler can go out there and just ragdoll Gaethje around. But, you know, Gaethje might surprise people and pull off a submission. Could happen. You know, he's not going to be looking for it. He's not going to put him on the ground. But I don't think that Gaethje's got enough gas to do it. You know, he's gotten tired when he's gone to war in 2-round fights. If he's been put under a lot of pressure. When he's put under pressure, he has issue. And even though Gaethje is bringing pressure against Chandler, Chandler's bringing some against Gaethje too. Like he said, they're both coming out here to fight, and Chandler could go 5 rounds against very good opponents. You know, he went 5 rounds with Eddie Alvarez. He finished out Eddie Alvarez in the 4th round. He went 5 rounds with a not way past his prime Benson Henderson, who was still very explosive and strong. So he can go to war. So those are my thoughts, guys. That's my prediction. Thanks for watching. Be sure to let me know what you'd like to see next. Oh, special thank you to a subscriber who gave a request. They said they'd like to see a breakdown of Angela Lee, me break down her fight versus Antonia Shevchenko, and how I thought she made progression in her kickboxing from day one when she showed up to getting better and better.